From an early age, most of us take a dim view of snitches, and many of you will have known that kid in school that you might say was an informant for the teacher. Telltales, turncoats, tattlers, sneak, squealers, stoolies, rats, and grassers. They don't usually come off as the best kind of people, but then you might look at a case more deeply and ask if perhaps that person did the right thing. Maybe they had no choice. It was getting one person in trouble or many others getting hurt. The criminal underworld might swear an oath of allegiance to never tell on others, but maybe there's a right time to snitch. Listen to these stories of well-known weasels and tell us what you think. Tim Allen. We guess there's a lot you don't know about the American actor and comedian called Tim Allen, who was actually born Timothy Allen Dick. The funny guy had quite a troubled life when he was young, and not many people know much about his cocaine dealing days. We're not talking about sorting friends out with a gram before they headed off to the 70s disco. We're talking about a serious dealer. There's some mention of this on his Wikipedia page, but the details are pretty scant. As the story goes, cops were on to Allen since he was selling quite a lot of the Colombian marching powder, and in 1978 there was a sting operation to capture him. He was caught with 1.4 pounds of cocaine, which was enough to be looking at some serious time behind bars. He didn't really do that much time, and that's because he snitched. He only ended up serving almost 2.5 years at the Federal Correctional Institution in Sandstone, Minnesota, even though he had been looking at more time. He once said in an interview, "I was put in a holding cell with 20 other guys. We had to crap in the same crapper in the middle of the room, and I just told myself, I can't do this for 7.5 years. I want to kill myself." He might have also been given a life sentence because at the time of his arrest, a new law was passed that warranted such long sentencing for guys caught with large quantities of cocaine or heroin. In a book about his arrest, it said to get out of doing so much time, Allen agreed to cooperate with the authorities as to what was going down in the drug dealing scene in his area. That book states that he helped the authorities indict 20 people in the drug trade and resulted in the conviction and sentencing of 4 major drug dealers. It also says the judge made sure he wouldn't end up in a local prison because that could endanger his life. Court documents also revealed that the judge thought him to be a talented up-and-coming comedian. Eli Kazan. This Hollywood movie director was one of the greats. He directed movies that have gone down in history, such as A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and East of Eden. But in the 1950s, at around the time his creative talents were peaking, he also became a government snitch and named names. And these were some of the biggest names in Hollywood. You see, Kazan had once been a devoted communist. He gave that up, but knowing what he knew, and with the US government paranoid about communists, they wanted to recruit him to ask him who in Hollywood circles was a commie. Kazan ended up testifying before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and he gave up a lot of big names, mostly actors. Those actors' careers and in some part lives were then destroyed. They were blacklisted from Hollywood. At the time, a lot of other Hollywood names thought Kazan should not have done what he did, seeing that the red under the bed thing was viewed by some people as an all-American witch hunt that was far from ethical. Many years later, actors would condemn this director, even though his talent for making movies was never questioned. Ronald Reagan. The actor that would become the President of the United States was also a snitch and in fact spent a lot of time spying on his fellow actors and other creatives in the movie scene. Reagan wasn't a communist that had defected, but when in 1946 he was visited by the FBI and told commies were among him in Hollywood, he agreed to help. The FBI has files on lots of suspected communists, but with Reagan's help they got more information. The New York Times many years later would write that the evidence Reagan provided was not always cogent. In fact, while he usually did what he was told, he might well have given the FBI weak information that nonetheless affected a few careers. Known as Informant T10, Reagan was one of the many people in Hollywood that was giving information to the FBI. T10 was mentioned in an FBI document written in 1947 called Communist Infiltration of the Motion Picture Industry. There was also a well-known actress called T9. The document states that Reagan wouldn't just overhear people talking, but would actively interview people to find out what their political leanings were. Walt Disney. Yep, the man whose name is behind all those cartoons we all know and love was also a snitch. The New York Times wrote in the 90s that documents released under the Freedom of Information Act revealed that Walter Elias Disney had been an informant for the FBI from 1940 until he died in 1966. As with most classified files released to the public though, so much is blacked out. All the good bits, of course. But Disney, who is well known for being planted firmly on the right side of politics, testified before the Committees on Un-American Activities and in Washington. It said J. Edgar Hoover did favors for Disney, and Disney in return gave his scripts to Hoover to check them out. Maybe they would have content Hoover didn't approve of. It said Hoover even made a slight change to an episode of The Mickey Mouse Club. Disney made sure some Mickey Mouse cartoons made the police look like great guys. This was done to get into the heads of American children. The Times writes that because of all the work Disney did for the FBI, they made him a full special agent in charge contact. That same article states, as a bureau contact, Disney reported on the activities of Hollywood actors, writers, producers, directors, technicians, and union activists suspected of political subversion. It's not known just how many people were affected by Walt's involvement with the FBI. Kobe Bryant. In 2003, the famed basketball player Kobe Bryant was arrested on sexual assault charges. During this time, Bryant would tell the cops that his teammate Shaquille O'Neal would pay women $1 million to get his way with them. The charges were dropped against Bryant, but one might wonder why he threw O'Neal under the bus. Shaq always denied he did such things, once saying to the media, "I never hang out with Kobe, I never hung around with him. In the 7 or 8 years we were together, we were never together." So how this guy can think he knows anything about me or my business is funny. And one last thing, I'm not the one buying love, he's the one buying love. It seems these two really didn't get along, and in this case, the man who was snitched on snitched back. USA Today wrote, years later, after the case against him was dropped and a civil suit was settled out of court with no admission of guilt from Bryant, agents of prominent NBA players would still cite the O'Neal subplot as the sort of sin that inspired their clients to steer clear of Lakerland. Lil C's. American rapper James Lloyd, better known as Lil C, said he wasn't really a snitch and he had no choice but to take the stand and offer evidence in a trial against his former friend Lil Kim. She was convicted of perjury and ended up serving 1 year behind bars. While Lil C was at the incident of a shootout involving Lil Kim and her crew and another crew, she never called him to defend her. Instead, the authorities called him. He said he had to do what they asked. Later, he said, being that we was witnesses there, the US government subpoenaed us, and there's nothing you can do about that. When you're subpoenaed, you either come or they take your ass to jail. It's just that simple. Henry Hill. We'll only mention one snitch that put mafia colleagues behind bars because this man became famous, mainly thanks to Martin Scorsese's brilliant movie Goodfellas. But Hill, in his own right, became well known, notably for his interviews, especially his appearances on The Howard Stern Show. He also wrote a book called The Wise Guy Cookbook, My Favorite Recipes from My Life as a Goodfella to Cooking on the Run. Before any of that happened, he was put into the Witness Protection Program because he ratted on people belonging to the mafia. Hill was not exactly a model person in the Witness Protection Program and was eventually removed from it. How did he feel about sending people to prison? It seems he thought it was him or them, and he decided to look after himself. As for the many who suffered while he was in the mafia, he once told the BBC, "I don't give a heck what those people think, I'm doing the right thing now." 6ix9ine. As we write this, the American rapper and actor Fat Joe just talked about 6ix9ine and said, "The worst thing you could do in the history of mankind is being a rat. You gotta understand, when you tell, you destroy families." He had a few kind words for 6ix9ine, calling him a bit of a gimmick. But what's the story here? Okay, so the young man Daniel Hernandez, aka Tekashi 6ix9ine, rose to fame in 2017 after releasing his single Gummo. He was also fond of using social media to build up fame, and with his wild hair and face full of tattoos, he certainly stood out. But then he was arrested on federal racketeering and weapons charges. He testified against 2 alleged 9 Trey gang members, one called Aljermiah Nuke Mack and another called Anthony Harv Ellison. But during his testimony, he accused other people of violent acts and just talked a lot about gangs and who belonged to them. He was kind of bringing down the house on some of his associates. With all the charges against him, he could be looking at many years inside prison walls, but because he's cooperated with authorities, he may not serve so many years. Of course, he likely won't ever work in the music business again. Well, it'd be hard to get people on his side in the rap scene. He has been criticized by many big names. His life will be in danger anyway, either inside prison or on the streets. He's declined to go into the Witness Protection Program, but hey, with a face like his, it'd be hard to hide. Looking at recent reports, it may seem he will hide in plain sight when he hits the streets, but he'll use the cash he's made to have 24-hour security. His trial is set for December 18th, 2019. We'll just add to the end of the show that while snitching is seen by many people as a bad thing to do, you might wonder just what harm not snitching might do. Is it okay to snitch on a killer? What if they go on to cause a lot more trouble and heartache? A person interviewed by NPR said that the taboo of snitching needs to stop because when people don't go to the cops, the community just faces more dangers. He said even law-abiding people tend not to snitch as they just don't want any trouble, but that has to stop. Snitches might sometimes get stitches in prison and on the outside, but some people think snitching is the ethical thing to do at times, and it can sometimes actually be a brave thing to do. We found one article online that told us that parents in one crime-ridden neighborhood in Florida were trying to end the no-snitching culture that their kids were growing up in. They got together to fight for the introduction of a new bill which would better protect the identities of people that go to the police. They said there was just too much blood on the streets, and that was partly because killers knew they were somewhat protected by the no-snitching policy. Tampa Bay police were interviewed for the article, and a spokesperson said this: "We have violent crimes where there were dozens of witnesses, but they don't provide the information needed to arrest someone. Many times that's due to the fear of some type of retaliation." That same story talked about lots of shootings, and the sad thing was that a lot of the victims were still teenagers. We might wonder if snitching is sometimes the right thing to do. So after hearing these stories, what do you think about these snitches? Were any in the right doing what they did? Tell us in the comments. Now go watch Most Epic Fails of the Witness Protection Program. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.